Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. With women comprising about a fourth of those living with HIV in the United States, Susan Rodriguez recognized the need for a safe and supportive environment that could provide HIV-positive women with information and encouragement. So she co-founded SMART, Sisterhood Mobilized for AIDS, HIV Research and Treatment, more than 20 years ago, at a time when many people thought of HIV/AIDS as a gay man's disease. Rodriguez knew differently, however, since learning in 1995 that she was HIV positive. What does it mean to be a woman living with HIV/AIDS in 2018? And how close are we to finding a cure? Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You know, hardly anybody talks about AIDS anymore. You know, after the crisis of the 1980s, when tens of thousands of people were getting the disease and virtually everybody who got it died, the development of antiretroviral drugs has led us to assume that HIV/AIDS has become a treatable disease, a chronic but treatable disease, much like diabetes. The Centers for Disease Control estimates that about 1.2 million Americans are currently living with HIV, and we do know that the number of infections has been declining. So the question is living with HIV today pretty much like living with any other chronic disease, or is it different?
It is. You do have to take pills if you're on medication. There are other illnesses that can happen to you that are exacerbated. Living with HIV, you can become diabetic. You can get cardiovascular disease, which can come from the medication. It could come from aging.
Yeah.
So they're seeing more of us living, 20 or more years, and we are aging, and there are other chronic illnesses that
are kicking in.
As a
result of living longer.
Exactly.
But would you say that pretty much most people who are living with HIV live normal lives in terms of being able to work and able to, find housing, that kind of thing?
I think it's a case-by-case kind of situation. When I was first diagnosed, I knew nothing about this illness. My husband was diagnosed with an AIDS diagnosis in 1995. When he tested positive, I had to test, and then I had 3 young children, and they had to be tested, and it turned out that my middle child was HIV positive as well. And I was working, and it was not on my radar. I knew nothing about this illness, so it was kind of me doing a crash course of learning about this disease that I thought I had 6 months. And, you just learn different ways to take care of yourself.
Right.
And for me, it was nutrition that really was a way that I got control back into my life.
Tell me about that.
Well, in 1995, the drugs that you just said, the antiretrovirals, they were just kind of on the horizon. And, the information that I was getting at that time is, they didn't know a lot about the drugs, especially how they worked with women, and especially how they worked with pediatrics. So I had to get as much information as possible. But one component that I was seeing that gave me a lot of control was taking care of myself nutritionally, taking care of my kids nutritionally, and making sure that we were eating healthy. And that gave me a little bit of control in my life.
So the way of eating healthy, if you are living with HIV, is it pretty much the kind of eating healthy that we should all be doing?
Exactly. And it is more important if you have certain illnesses, but I felt like that was one way to keep my health much longer.
You hear about the drug regimen.
Yes.
The drug regimen, people taking 40 pills a day and having side effects.
Yeah, I think those days are over.
Those days are over?
I think they've improved a lot. I'm not going to say what my medications are, but I've been basically on the same regimen for about 15, 16 years. And it wasn't one of the, what they called protease inhibitors. It was a very kind of, it was a lower kind of regimen. And it worked for me. Mm-hmm. My daughter, on the other hand, when she was first diagnosed, she was turning 4, and her immune system hadn't fully developed. And over the years, she's had to be on different medications, what more high-powered. Mine was more low-powered.
Okay.
Because I always had a very low viral load, high T cells. So when I finally went on the medications, it was like maybe 4 years after my diagnosis. And but with my daughter, I had put her into a clinical trial because I knew nothing about this. And part of the clinical trial that she was in had a nutritional component. So I was really exposed early on about how nutrition and eating well would improve our life expectancy.
Right. Are there, and I'm talking about people that in general living with HIV, mm-hmm. Are there side effects of the drug regimen?
Absolutely. I mean, what I experienced in the beginning when I did go on medication is simultaneously when I went on medication, I also was given a breast cancer diagnosis.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that was in 1999. And I had just gone on therapy, and somehow so I had to be on chemotherapy and then radiation. And they knew nothing about the interactions with the drugs, but they said, you'll be okay. And I said, I don't know. And it did kind of supercharge the medications that I was taking. I did lose like a lot of body fat in my legs, maybe even in my face. I really, I can't really notice that. Mm-hmm. And what people were experiencing were like physical problems, but also internal, like people were getting fat deposits around their organs and things like that from some of the medications.
Right.
So there are, these drugs haven't been around for so long, right. And,
but they're getting better. I mean,
I think people's care is getting better, especially in New York City. I don't know in other states, but New York has like the best doctors and the best care. I know that I do, and they do check for diabetes because some of the drugs can cause, diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So
and I would assume that you're periodically checking what the viral load is.
Oh, absolutely. I go to the doctor probably every 3 to 4 months, and they do check. And ever since I've been on medication, I've had like very low viral load. And
I understand that, I was reading, well, obviously people still die of HIV-related illnesses. Yes. I was reading that almost 7,000 deaths attributable to HIV, and this
in the United States,
2014.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised to learn that tuberculosis is the #1 HIV-related disease that people with HIV die from. I had not known that. I mean, you used to hear about Kaposi sarcoma and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it was
tuberculosis. I would assume because, especially in low-income communities of color where HIV is, at a higher rate, tuberculosis is one of the cofactors, and they could be more susceptible.
Yeah.
People living with HIV.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. How about the social impact of HIV? I mean, there was a time when it was, like a real stigma.
Oh, absolutely.
And you didn't know, parents didn't know if they wanted children with HIV or HIV positive in their school. You had the whole Ryan White business. People would keep it a secret. Is this more accepted now? Or do you think that from the people you talk to, do people still keep their HIV status a secret?
I think both. I think people, you know, it is a social, it's a sexual disease, and I did feel the stigma early on. I couldn't even talk about it, and it got to a point where I said, look, either I sink or swim, and I'm going to swim, and I wasn't going to. In order for me to help myself, help my family, I had to disclose. And for me, it worked out. I mean, there is still stigma. It's about even disclosing. Like, I could disclose, yes, I had breast cancer, but I may not want to talk about my HIV diagnosis, you know, because that goes into, oh, well, how did you get it? And, you know, that goes into areas that, you don't want to go into. It's not your business.
Your organization concentrates on women with HIV. Why? Is there do women with HIV need special attention?
Women do need special attention, period. And when I first started SMART in 1998 with a group of women living with HIV, it was to provide the support network that women really were not getting at that time. As you had mentioned before, it was really seen as a gay men's disease, and women were going to gay men support groups to get the support and the information. And when I started learning more and becoming more involved, I saw the need to get more information to women, you know, specifically. And just the whole women's issues. A lot of us do come from interpersonal violence backgrounds. We just needed that safe space. And not that women with HIV have more of domestic violence statistics. It does come into play when you get that HIV diagnosis and you're trying to create that safe space for women to just be able to come where their partner knows that they can't come there.
Yeah.
You know, because we have a lot of different issues. Treatment education is a very broad area. One week we may talk about GYN care, and one week we may talk about power and control situations. So we want our women to know that what is said there stays there, and that they can get the support and information to stay healthy.
We're going to take a short break, then we'll be back with Susan Rodriguez after this message. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy, and I'm talking with Susan Rodriguez, founding director of SMART, Sisterhood Mobilized for AIDS HIV Research and Treatment. If you're a teenage girl who might have contracted, become HIV positive through your mother, or if you are a young woman who is, say, in her 20s, trying to have a social life, how does being HIV positive affect your social life going forward?
Well, that would be a better question for my younger, my daughters. But I would say if you're a teen, you know, through behaviorally infected, or I feel like here in New York City, there are not too many teens who are perinatally infected. They're mostly in their 20s. My daughter is actually turning 27 this year, and she has been living with it.
Okay.
But you know what? It really does. I think with her, she has been in relationships that have been. Disclosure is one of the major issues of her diagnosis of being HIV. And, you know, you're able to get somebody special. It really is not going from man to man and having she has very solid relationships. And I felt like with her, she really was able to tap into something that I didn't have when I was a teenager. You know, you're just not really thinking about, you know.
But I mean, with women in general, of whatever age, you know, you meet somebody that you sort of like, and you have this disease that you have, and it has a certain stigma. I would imagine that dealing with situations like that would be something that you would talk about in your support groups.
I think when I was first diagnosed, it really did mess with my head. It did take away a little bit of my, took a lot of my sexuality away. For women living here in the United States, it is very, very low transmission, if any, is almost impossible.
From woman to man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's more the other way around.
Okay.
And
but that doesn't mean men wouldn't run the opposite direction when they find out that you are HIV positive.
And, you know, I would have, I'm not in the dating scene, so I really don't have to disclose my, my diagnosis with people. So but I feel like I think you can develop a better relationship with someone. Like, you know, you can have a healthier relationship when you're, it's not pinned down on just having sex. But it is, yeah.
Always wondered if people who are, you know, living with HIV, whether male or female, if their intimate relationships are primarily with other people who are HIV positive or not. I don't know, you don't see that?
No, no, not really. I mean, I think when I was still like possibly dating, you know, it didn't factor in that what their diagnosis was, or you know, you would want to have safe sex because there are other STIs that you can get.
Yeah, yeah.
That it just I never thought about if somebody was positive that's who I need to be with.
And that's not an issue? I mean, you don't hear that issue from the women that you deal with?
No, I mean, I don't.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, it could, you know, if they're in this, I don't know.
Okay.
That's an area that I think people have kind of gone beyond that, and that just to stay with somebody just because of what their status is just not.
Okay. So you established SMART in East Harlem in 1998. Why East Harlem, and why did you start the organization?
Yeah. It was where I was getting my care at Metropolitan Hospital, which is in East Harlem. And I went for a training the year before with another person, Lorna Gottesman, and we got training to bring an HIV university into our community. And I got the most support from the doctors at Metropolitan at that time in East Harlem to start SMART University.
Is it okay, is SMART it's a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. Do you get any public funding, or is it all private funding?
We get public and private foundation. We get discretionary funding from the city council. We get some corporate funding. And when we did start SMART, the women actually came up with the name.
Okay.
They didn't want it to be called HIV University. Mm-hmm. They came up with the name SMART, and then we came up with what it would mean.
How many women do you serve in the course of a year?
We serve about, I would say over 1,000.
Okay. Now, food seems to be a big part of your program.
Yes, it is. It definitely
Cooking
is.
And nutrition education?
When we do have our classes, which are in 3 8-week cycles, we provide meals for each one of our programs. We can serve up to like 125 to 135 per week to our program participants, not just women. We do have a youth program. My kids had started a youth program in 2005. We prepare meals together in our cooking class, Smart Body, but as part of our other programming, we do serve lunch or a very healthy breakfast. And
is all this free, or is
it is all free, and we also give a Metro card.
You have something called Smart University where you have these
Treatment education.
Right. Your spring session, which is coming up on April 3rd,
Yes.
features lectures on hoarding, relationship building, mood stabilization, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. Interesting topics.
Exactly, because we, over the years, as SMART has grown and evolved, we've seen certain mental health issues that do need to be addressed. And we're actually working with a facility, I think it's Lenox Hill, that is providing instructors for each one of these components, because my staff was coming back to me, giving me feedback from the women that these are things that they wanted to get information, to get resources. And mental health is not one size fits all.
Right.
It is broken up into different components, and we felt like these were areas that people can improve their lives and get the tools and be able to talk about certain things.
You also provide information to these women about cutting edge information about health issues and other ideas for healthier living. Have there been any recent kinds of breakthroughs in the whole area of HIV/AIDS prevention that you let them know about?
Sure. I mean, we do, through Smart University, we may have a class about drugs in the pipeline, any kind of updates around that. But because over the years we have more women from other areas, it's not just focused on. We do try to provide information about HIV. We do provide, not we try. But we do kind of keep it more holistic and comprehensive in terms of
women's health issues in general.
Women's health issues, and because it's about creating, giving people the information so that they can stay healthier mentally
I've heard
and physically.
And read about PrEP, which is, I guess it's a drug that you can take that very sharply reduces the likelihood that you will get AIDS from sexual activity.
Yes, that is one of the prevention models that are being used. And I know that it has been, they are trying to get more women to use it. I'll be honest, I am not a big PrEP fan.
Okay, why not?
Because especially in low-income communities of color, women, using the drug it's using a drug plus having, using condoms as well. If they are not in care and being tracked, and having blood workup done, this particular drug can cause kidney problems.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And it's really, there's controversy with it.
Okay.
And
So
I'm not a big PrEP person. I'm probably in the minority.
Okay. We're almost out of time, but if someone suspects that they may have contracted HIV, what should they do?
I would say go find a really good clinic here in New York. There's several that an infectious disease clinic that do have services for HIV positive people, because they have health, they have the primary care, they have the mental health component, and it's all kind of, they work together.
So you need to get the primary care, the mental health, and probably a support group, I would think, like yours.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank Susan Rodriguez for joining me today. For more information on SMART, you can visit their website, smartuniversity.org. For One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. If there are any people you'd like to hear from or topics you'd like us to explore, please let us know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.